Good morning, Eric Boehlert.
Hey, how are you?
Well, I'm always fresh from watching you on AM Joy, thinking, boy, he's good. And then
Thanks.
and then here you are. Wow, I have to say, even for Trump, this 5 days, and plus you always think you're going to get a break for
I know.
right, a holiday. And I have to say, I feel like this all pivots off the Flynn news, right? That Flynn is likely cooperating and has flipped because he was crazier and, there are more lies per second, I think, than any period we've had.
I don't even know if he's cognizant, or if he's just bored and playing golf and live tweeting Fox News. I mean, we don't even know at this point. If there were no Russia investigation, he might be just as crazy.
Right.
He might be cartoonishly insecure. He might be advertising his personality disorders at every possible turn. So the weird wild card is we don't even know if it's the fact that his aides are being indicted that's driving all this, or if he's just insane and he doesn't even really care about what's going on with Russia. I mean, he's tweeting this morning. His fantasy about Time Magazine called him to be Person of the Year. Look, I mean, this guy was never loved as a child, and there's no other way around it.
Wow. Right, but I mean, just lying about things so blatantly that he knows are going to be lies about things that he's already admitted, like the Access Hollywood tape. I mean, it's you really do start to say, Eric, is this, as you say, Trump Russia, or is it dementia? Is it right?
Delusional. I'll certainly embrace delusional. Look, this is what pathological liars do, right? Everyone else who thinks about lying or watches a lie thinks, well, is it worth it? Can I get away with it? Why did he do it? What was his end game? Why did he think it would work out? Didn't he know people would? None of that matters to them. And Trump, as a pathological liar, has shown he will lie about everything and anything. Doesn't think twice. He's been doing it his entire adult life. Got away with it in New York City with the local media. Everyone pretended his company was worth $8 billion. A couple of weeks ago, Crain's New York kind of sheepishly admitted, it's worth $400 million. Trump's people lied to us for 2 decades, and now we finally have access to real numbers. So we're taking his company. It's not the third largest privately held company in New York City. It's the 49th largest privately held company in New York City, because he lied to us every year.
Right.
So, but everyone is realizing what's going on.
But it doesn't take a genius, right, Eric, to go something even bigger than this Flynn stuff must be coming, because by the time you're saying, the Access Hollywood tape that you saw and heard with your own eyes and ears is fake. I mean, what was this quote? Since the first day I took office, all you hear is the phony Democrat excuse for losing the elections, Russia, Russia, Russia. Despite this, I have the economy booming, thank you, Obama, and have possibly done more than any 10-month president. Make America great again. I mean, it's like he's achieved absolutely nothing in 10 months, except we have some indictments, right? I mean, I don't even...
That's why I think he leans on the NFL thing so heavily, because he honestly thinks this is one of his great accomplishments. And that he has sort of sparked this controversy, and the NFL kind of seems to be defensive. I mean, I think if you asked him now if he could hook him up to a lie detector test, he probably sees that as his greatest accomplishment.
Yeah.
Whereas anyone else would, point to some sort of, legislative agenda, excuse me, foreign policy agenda, something like that. But he's kind of this talk radio president, where if he can sort of, no offense, but I'm talking about the right wing.
Present company accepted. Yes.
And on the right wing, all they try to do is kind of stir up these these little trolling fights day in and day out. And I think that's how he views his presidency, and he thinks this NFL thing is a huge win for him, and that'll be his legacy.
I mean, I don't think you're right that any of us even that saw all this coming, that knew that he was going to double and triple and quadruple down on just dividing us along every line possible, right? Racial, partisan, sex. I mean, it's I don't even know what to say. You tweeted, Trump's tripling down on an accused child molester. What a time to be a Republican. I mean, I guess there is no line.
Eric.
Yes.
This is Monique. Do you think he just has I don't want to say he's a sociopath, but I think he also has a severe case of oppositional behavior. That's a real thing. Like, the more you try to get some people, the more you try to get them to do something.
Right.
Yeah. I think he's a classic case of oppositional behavior.
Yeah.
Well, I think he has several personality disorders. One of them, is clearly malignant narcissist.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I think a lot of them overlap into other things. And yeah, I mean, he is, and I think everyone who works for him has realized no one even tries to talk him into anything. Nobody even tries to say, hey, maybe this is our strategy going forward. He doesn't listen to anyone. So yeah, I think that's a good point. We've never had a president who won't take counsel from anyone, combined with a president who doesn't know anything about any policy issue facing the United States, immigration, taxation, foreign policy. So it's an amazing double combo.
Oh my God! In the middle of this horrible tragedy in Egypt, Eric, that he's tweeting about a wall between us and Mexico and a travel ban, which doesn't include Egypt. Like, it makes no sense, and he makes every tragedy worse, right?
He does. He makes every tragedy worse. And you mentioned sociopath. I mean, sociopaths don't have empathy and don't have sympathy, among other key characteristics. So, he's kind of definitely walking up to that line on a regular basis.
Sociopath light, I would say.
You also,
yeah, exactly.
Eric, you put it in larger context. You tweeted, I'll believe it when I see it. Anyone who thinks the institutional misogyny that blocked Hillary's victory has been suddenly washed away as being a bit naive. You said, I also think people should look at Trump voters' corrosive view of women to explain the 2016 election. I think the 2016 results were an ugly combo of race and sex factors. Yeah, in addition to Russia. I mean, and it's... Boy, proving your point, by the way, about the New York Times and their Clinton everybody's talking about this puff piece on this neo-Nazi, right? That, he likes Seinfeld and Cats. It's like, who cares? Like, as you've often said, has there been one profile of a Hillary voter? I mean, it's just normalizing this new, right?
It is.
Trump's America.
Yeah, and we've talked about this for on and off for a year, on how the New York Times has just been completely, I mean, the D.C. press in general for the first 4 or 5 months after Trump's victory was just obsessed with Trump voters. Oh my gosh, we miss them. Oh my gosh, we have to go to the Rust Belt. Oh my gosh, we have to go to all white counties. Right. But a lot of them kind of got it out of their system, and the New York Times has just absolutely dedicated this. So if you're obsessed with Trump, normalizing and celebrating Trump voters, before you know it, you're going to end up normalizing and kind of humanizing Nazi sympathizers, which is exactly what the Times did over the weekend.
Right. And wasn't the most disgusting part of it, Eric, where the Nazis saying, well, I used to be a bad thing. I used to be ashamed. But now, with Donald Trump, I feel like, it's no big deal. It's like, that's exactly the point, and why you shouldn't be amplifying these people.
But on the other hand, Eric and Stephanie, and I've said this to people and I get in trouble all the time.
Yeah.
Don't we need to know where these people are? Like, in a weird way, I think it's kind of like, this is the beginning of the end. This is the pus on the pimple. Like, you know how you have those big red dots and you can't squeeze them?
Well, I totally understand that. I just think the execution was totally wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's okay to shine a spotlight, and the Times editor and the pushback was this: we weren't celebrating. This is an important trend. We need to know what's going on. And I think everyone would agree with that. As I mentioned on Joy's show yesterday, if you're doing a story on a Nazi sympathizer, you have to have the word anti-Semite and or racist, or preferably both, within the first 5 paragraphs.
Yep.
And to not have it anywhere in the story, which is what the Times did, the execution is just wrong. You can't, I think the Times wanted everyone to read between the lines. If you're going to do this stuff, you got to hit people over the head. And again, the context is they have been obsessing over these voters and this fringe for so long. And
I don't care how we can better understand Nazis and Klan members. But anyway, I'd rather that they did something on what you tweeted. About 6 months ago, I tweeted the D.C. press was massively underplaying Tillerson's dismantling of the State Department. They're finally catching up. I mean, if it's not alarming what's happening, in terms of our reputation around the world and in the State Department, then what is?
Yeah, and there was a report over the weekend that specifically the person in charge of embassy security in the wake of Benghazi could not get 5 minutes with Rex Tillerson. He eventually had to point to the law that said he by law had to be given FaceTime with the Secretary of State when required. He got 5 minutes, and now he's gone. So all those people who were wringing their hands and these false tears about Benghazi for 4 years, confirmation number 100 that none of it mattered to them. It was all about politics, and now we're leaving our embassies unprotected in a serious way.
Yeah, I mean, we have never been in such a nakedly partisan environment. Where you wrote a piece on Roy Moore, and as you often do, you also applaud when we do see journalism. You talked about 2 news anchors that busted a Republican pundit for lying about Moore's accusers, right?
Yeah, and talking about trying to reinvent the facts, or trying to look. I love the storyline that we can't believe the accusers because it was 40 days before the election, and things like that. I pointed out if Democratic operatives who are nowhere near this Roy Moore story, Doug Jones's campaign hasn't had a finger on this story. There are no pollsters or Democratic lawyers paying these women like we often saw on the flip the script in the 90s, where the Clinton accusers were often bankrolled by people. If this was run by the Democratic Party, it wouldn't have broke 40 days before the election. I guarantee you that. It would have been 4 days before the election.
Right.
And because this is giving them time to kind of normalize all this. And by the time in December, it's not going to be that big a deal in Alabama.
And to say, look over there at Franken, which is, of course, just not analogous in any way. I mean, you're talking about just Lee Korfman, who was said she was 14 when Roy Moore sexually assaulted her, said she's been telling people this story for years. Her relatives, her friends, her children. It was only when she spoke with the Post and realized she wasn't the only one, she decided to come out publicly, right? But it's, I think they, as you say, they throw in the name like Gloria Allred and go, oh, this is, partisan. When, as you were saying in here, she didn't get involved until all of this was already, 9 women had already come forward.
That's right. So again, she didn't plot all of this, and Democrats had nothing to do with it. They're not paying for anything, and look, and so Democrats are going to leave this to the voters. They're not going to turn this into a political event. They're not going to turn this into the part of the DNC. But for Alabama, 40 days is a long time. And Trump, last week Megyn Kelly came out and said, "Oh, we need Doug Jones' vote." And within 4 or 5 days, Trump is totally on board. So, and there was a piece over the weekend in the Times about, Trump endorses Moore and fractures the party. Trump couldn't care less about the Republican Party. He couldn't care less about what happens to them in 2018. And B, he's a sexual predator himself. So, of course, as we've talked about, there's no way he can ever tell Roy Moore to get out of this race when he did the same thing and got elected. And now, as you're talking about, he's being delusional and suggesting maybe that Access Hollywood tape was fake. So look, it all goes back to these personality disorders. He's completely delusional, and he's our president.
Yeah, he suggested a contest this morning. I suggest one. Which mental illness do you think he is most deeply afflicted with?
Ooh,
Eric,
like
great stuff as always. We will, and as we always say, good luck.
Okay, yes, good luck to you. Have a good week.
All right, see you next week. 22 minutes after the every week is like a year. Trump land.